If you find this diary after I'm gone, please read every word. I've written everything you need to know. The air in Maple Hill College always smelled like a mix of damp books and lost time. It was the kind of campus that looked more haunted in daylight than it did at night. Red brick buildings with ivy crawling up their sides, archways older than most of the staff, and a library that creaked like it had secrets. But it was quiet, prestigious, and tucked away in a New England town where people locked their doors religiously and gossiped like it was prayer. Ivy Lane was one of its brightest students, the kind of girl who always looked like she was halfway between a smile and a secret. She wasn't loud, wasn't the life of any party, but she listened. And when she did, you felt like she understood more than she let on. Ivy was a literature major, obsessed with stories. But the one she left behind was never meant to be fiction. It began with her roommate, Lena, finding the journal. It was a Thursday morning, the kind of cold that gnawed at your fingertips, even indoors. Lena hadn't seen Ivy in 2 days. Not unusual during exam season, but enough to make her feel off. The campus was already buzzing about Ivy missing a major English lecture. Dr. Ritchie had even called her name twice, then muttered something about a brilliant mind going to waste. Lena had assumed Ivy was just deep in one of her reading spells, disappearing into the library or her favorite writing spot in the old amphitheater behind the music hall. But something wasn't right. Ivy's bed was made, untouched. Her backpack sat by the door. And then there was the diary, a plain black notebook lying on her desk, the kind you'd overlook if you weren't looking for something to find. Except the first page was torn halfway out. And scrawled across the top, in smeared blue ink, were the words, "They say it's not real if no one believes you. But what if it's too late by the time they do?" Lena opened the diary with a kind of hesitation she couldn't explain. And that's when she started to read. "I think someone is following me, or maybe I'm imagining it. But the feeling doesn't go away, even when I'm home, especially then. It's not the kind of fear that screams, it whispers. A cold breath on the back of your neck. I don't know who or why. But if something happens to me, this is where the truth begins." Lena felt her hands tremble. At first, she told herself, Ivy was probably working on some writing prompt. She loved true crime, often said she wanted to write something so real people wouldn't know if it was fiction. But it didn't feel like a story. It felt like a confession. Over the next few pages, the entries grew more frantic. Ivy documented strange happenings, books misplaced, her laptop turning on in the middle of the night, doors she swore she'd locked left open. Once, she mentioned a shadow outside her window, watching her for what felt like hours. "They don't leave notes or threats. That would be too easy. It's like they want me to doubt myself, to slowly come undone." Lena slammed the book shut and took it to campus security. She didn't wait. The officer, a bald man named Travis Glenn, looked at her over the rim of his glasses and gave a tight smile.
"In journals, students write all kinds of things. Maybe she's dealing with some mental health issues. Journals aren't exactly evidence."
Lena wanted to scream. Instead, she pointed out Ivy's sudden disappearance, her last known class, her missed calls, the tone of her writing. But Travis waved it off.
"She probably just needed a break. Midterms get to people. If she's not back in 24 hours, come back."
She left, feeling smaller than she ever had. That night, Ivy's name was added to the missing persons bulletin on the campus app. The next entry Lena read came from October 6th. Today, I saw him. I think I know who it is. But no one would believe me if I said his name. He's smart. He knows the system. And the worst part, he's not the only one. Lena's stomach turned. She flipped ahead to see if Ivy had named some names. But the entries stopped suddenly after October 10th, just 4 days before she went missing. That night, Lena couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about Ivy's soft-spoken nature, how she'd once told her, "If something ever happened to me, check my stories. They're always more real than they seem." The next morning, Lena did something she didn't want to do. She went to Professor Ritchie. He'd always liked Ivy, called her the quiet storm. He'd written her a glowing letter of recommendation just 2 weeks ago. When Lena showed him the diary, he didn't scoff like Travis had. He read, silently, for 15 minutes, then looked up and said,
"This isn't fiction." A month earlier, she walked into my office with a stack of poems, short fiction, and a nervous smile. She said, "I want to work on an independent project, something personal, a narrative built from real events." I'd nodded. "A memoir?" "Not exactly," she replied. "It's about fear, about not being believed." Then she left, with her outline on the table. But I hadn't looked at it until now.
When he opened his drawer to find it, it was gone. Back in her dorm, Lena couldn't stop replaying Ivy's words. He's not the only one. She thought of Professor Keene, the overly charming psych professor who once got too close during a study group. She thought of Chase Dillard, the TA with an ego and a temper. She even thought of Dean Mallory, who once said Ivy was too emotional for someone so brilliant. But it wasn't just them. It could be anyone. 3 days passed. Campus was in a haze of whispers. Ivy's photo was everywhere, on bulletin boards, social media, dorm doors. Students wore purple ribbons for Ivy. Classes dimmed with her absence. But the police didn't find a clue during the investigation. The diary remained inconclusive. No proof of harm. No suspect. No body. And then something strange happened. A new entry appeared. Lena found it taped to her mirror. If you're reading this, it means you're in danger too. Be careful who you trust. Lena didn't scream. She wanted to, but her breath caught in her throat, heart pounding so loud it nearly drowned out the silence of the dorm room. The note on her mirror was unmistakably written in Ivy's handwriting. The ink was fresh, the tape still curled at the edges. But Ivy wasn't there. Lena reached for her phone with trembling fingers and called campus security again. This time, she didn't ask. She demanded. "Someone was in my room." Ivy left a note. "I want an officer here now." Officer Travis arrived 20 minutes later, chewing gum like it was the only thing keeping him awake. He looked at the mirror, then at Lena, and said, "There's no sign of forced entry." Lena replied, "Someone got in. You don't understand. She's trying to warn me." The officer said, "Maybe you put it there and forgot. Stress can make you do weird things." "You think I forged it?" Lena's voice cracked. "Why would I scare myself like this?" Travis didn't answer. He just wrote something in his notebook and walked out, mumbling something about following protocol. That night, Lena didn't sleep again. She kept the lights on and sat with her back to the wall, holding Ivy's journal in her lap like it was a life vest. She flipped through it again, slowly this time, tracing each word like she might find something he missed. That's when she noticed something strange. In the margin of the October 6th entry, nearly invisible unless held against the light, were tiny indentations, like someone had written something, then erased it. She gently rubbed a pencil over the space, and slowly, faint letters emerged. Room 302, Thursday, midnight. Lena checked the campus map. Room 302 was in Eastbridge Hall, one of the older buildings, half empty now, mostly used for administrative storage and maintenance. Thursday was tomorrow. The corridor to room 302 smelled like dust and neglect. The overhead lights flickered, like they couldn't decide whether to stay awake or die out. Lena's hands shook as she approached the door. It was old, heavy, with peeling white paint and a dent near the handle. She waited until her phone clock struck midnight. Then she knocked. No answer. She tried the handle. It opened. The room was empty, or so it seemed. Dust hung in the air like forgotten time. There were old filing cabinets, covered chairs, and shelves with yellowing papers. A single bulb flickered from the ceiling, casting long shadows across the floor. Lena stepped inside. That's when she heard it, a creak behind her. She spun around, but no one was there. And then she saw it. Tucked between the pages of a folder on the center table was another note, a torn-out page from Ivy's journal. I met with him here. I thought maybe I could make him stop. But he laughed. He told me I'd be gone before anyone listened. He said, "No one cares what scared girls say." Lena's throat tightened. Suddenly, the lights went out. Darkness swallowed the room. Her breath came in short gasps. She fumbled for her phone, turned on the flashlight, and that's when she heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, coming closer. She bolted. She didn't stop running until she was back in her dorm. She locked the door, wedged a chair under the knob, and collapsed onto her bed, sobbing silently into her pillow. She knew now without a doubt, this wasn't a case of paranoia. Ivy was trying to leave a trail, and someone was trying to erase it. The next day, Lena went to Professor Ritchie again. She didn't know who else to trust. She showed him the erased message, the new note, the page in room 302. His face went pale. "We need to take this to the police. They won't listen. They already don't. Then we need someone who has more to lose." That evening, they went to Dean Mallory's office. He greeted them with a forced smile. "Professor Ritchie, Miss Lena, I understand you're both concerned, but we're doing everything we can." "Are you?" Lena snapped. "Because Ivy was clearly documenting a threat, and now she's gone. Someone is covering it up." Mallory's smile vanished. Ivy Lane was a troubled young woman. Her disappearance is unfortunate, but baseless accusations. "Are you calling this baseless?" Ritchie dropped the journal on Mallory's desk. "Read it." Mallory didn't touch it. "You should leave now." Ritchie replied, "I taught her for 3 years. I saw her mind work like a maze. If she's dead, someone here let it happen." Mallory stared at him, and then, in a flat, calm voice, said, "Professor Ritchie, I suggest you focus on your lectures." It wasn't just a dismissal. It was a warning. That night, Lena received an email with the subject, "Urgent, Ivy's file request." The body read, Ivy Lane's personal counseling file has been removed from our records by administrative order. You are not authorized to inquire further. Please refrain from additional contact regarding this student. No signature, no contact information, just a warning of silence. But Lena wasn't going to stop. She dug through Ivy's drawers, found an old USB stick tucked beneath the lining of her jewelry box. On it were dozens of voice memos. One of them was titled, If Anything Happens to Me. Lena played it. Ivy's voice filled the room, soft, calm, but steady. I know how this sounds. Maybe I do sound paranoid, but this isn't just a feeling anymore. I've seen things. I've heard what they say when they think no one's listening. And I've learned the worst thing you can be is a girl who knows too much. If I'm gone, it wasn't an accident. Don't let them make me a rumor. Lena pressed stop. She stared at her screen. Her hands were ice. And then, another file caught her eye. Names. She played it. Ivy's voice was barely above a whisper. There's a list. I couldn't write it down. It's in the poetry journal, the one I submitted to Richie last semester. Each poem title is a clue. First letters, initials. It's all there, but if you say their names out loud, they'll know. Lena rushed to her bookshelf. She found the poetry journal tucked between two novels. Ivy's title, He Taught Me Silence. Evenings felt like traps. Never enough warnings. Dead eyes behind smiles. Then others. Master of Masks. All the right lies. Look at me when I cry. Loyalty is a bruise. Others watch and say nothing. Real men don't talk. Youth means obedience. Lena felt the blood drain from her face. Ivy had left everything behind, hidden in words, in whispers, in pieces. She hadn't been imagining anything, and now Lena had proof. But someone else knew she was getting close, because the next morning, taped to her door, was a note in all caps. Stop digging, or you'll join her. Lena stared at the note on her door for a full minute before touching it. The paper was standard printer stock. The message typed in bold black letters. Stop digging, or you'll join her. No signature, no clue, no fingerprint, just a cold, unmistakable threat. Her first instinct was to run. Her second was to cry. But what she did instead was walk calmly back inside, close the door, lock it, and sit on the edge of her bed with her phone in her hands. She dialed. Richie answered on the third ring. I got a note, she said quietly. They know I'm close. He didn't ask who. He didn't need to. I'm coming over. 40 minutes later. Professor Richie stood by the window, arms folded, staring out at the falling evening rain. Lena sat on the floor, legs tucked under her, clutching Ivy's poetry book. It's Mallory, she whispered. She named him. In her own way. He's the one she feared. And maybe others with him, Richie added. Men in power who know how to cover tracks. It's happened before. But how do we prove it? Richie turned. We don't go to the police this time. We go to someone who's been silenced before. Someone with nothing left to lose. They met her the next day. Her name was Amelia Reed. She was a former Maple Hill student, class of 2016. She had vanished from campus halfway through her junior year, without explanation. Rumors had flown. Breakdown, drugs, family emergency. The truth was far darker. Richie found her through an alumni contact. She lived alone now, in a small town 3 hours away, a recluse. She answered the door with tired eyes and a cautious stance, clutching the edge of the door like it might close on its own. Lena stepped forward, holding the poetry book in her hands. "We're here because of Ivy Lane. She disappeared last week. And we think the same people who hurt you hurt her too." Amelia opened the door and let them in. She didn't cry when she spoke. Her voice was flat, like someone telling a story that had happened to someone else. She spoke of a time when she had worked late nights in the student archives. Alone. Always alone. That's when Mallory began to visit her. At first, it was harmless. Questions, compliments, suggestions to switch majors, coffee invitations. Then came the nights. He waited outside the building. She found notes on her desk, the offers that turned into demands. When she finally reported him to the university board, they called her unstable, delusional. She was encouraging it, they said. Her scholarship disappeared. So did her spot on the campus journal. Her reputation dissolved in whispers, and eventually, she left. "You know what they said to me?" Amelia asked, voice trembling slightly. "They said I had a habit of romanticizing things. That maybe I'd written too many poems and couldn't tell fiction from reality." Richie looked sick while saying, "They buried the truth. And they'll do it again." Lena pulled out Ivy's journal and replied, "Unless we stop them." They returned to campus with something Ivy had never had, an ally who had survived, someone who could back up the pattern. And Lena had something else, the USB drive with Ivy's voice memos, hidden entries, and the coded poetry book. But time was running out, because Ivy's name was slowly slipping into a label. Missing, troubled, forgotten. The longer she was gone, the easier it became for people to turn her into a tragedy they didn't have to solve, unless Lena made them listen. Lena stayed up all night, preparing it. She compiled the evidence, voice memos, the poem clues, the diary scans, Amelia's testimony, time-stamped digital logs, and attached it all to one massive folder. Then she wrote, "The truth about Ivy Lane. To whom it may concern, you ignored her while she was alive. You erased her when she cried for help. But now, the truth speaks louder than silence. Attached is evidence of a pattern of abuse, silencing, and cover-up within Maple Hill College, involving current faculty and administration. Her name was Ivy Lane. You will remember her now. This folder has been sent to 10 separate media outlets. If I disappear, they'll publish everything. Your silence ends tonight." She sent it to every board member, faculty email, and department head. Then she waited. That morning, chaos broke. Emails bounced around campus like wildfire. The student app was flooded with screenshots. Twitter hashtags surged. Hashtag Justice for Ivy. Hashtag Maple Hill Cover-Up. By 10:30 a.m., local reporters were at the gate. Students protested in front of the administration building. And by noon, Dean Mallory had locked his office. But the biggest shock came at 3:45 p.m. They found Ivy. She was alive. She'd been held in the sub-basement of Eastbridge Hall, in a maintenance storage unit, behind a false wall, unconscious, dehydrated, but breathing. The paramedics said another 48 hours and she wouldn't have made it. The janitor who discovered her had seen the protest signs and remembered something odd from a few nights ago. A storage room that was supposed to be locked, but wasn't. They called it a miracle. Lena called it survival. Dean Mallory was arrested for obstruction and misconduct. 2 professors resigned before charges could be filed. A whistleblower from within the administration confirmed Ivy had reported harassment months earlier. Reports that vanished mysteriously. Ivy woke up 2 days later. Her voice was soft. Her hands trembled. But her eyes were steady. She looked at Lena and whispered, "You read it all?" Lena nodded. Every word. A long pause. Then Ivy smiled, tears in her eyes. Then I'm not just a story. But Lena knew something else too. The story wasn't over. Some of the names in Ivy's poems hadn't been identified. Some of the initials didn't match any current faculty. Someone had helped Mallory. Maybe more than one. Maybe someone still on campus. And Ivy? She remembered only parts of her abduction, but not the face of the person who'd lured her to room 302. He knew how to stay in the dark, she said. But I'll never forget his voice. The diary was no longer a warning, it was a map, and Lena was determined to follow it, because the system might forget, but Ivy's words would not. The hospital room was still. Ivy's face, pale against the whiteness of the pillow, barely moved as she breathed. Her arms trembled whenever she tried to lift them, her voice only a whisper. But her eyes held fire. Lena sat beside her every day. She read aloud to her, from Ivy's own diary, from the poetry book. Even from the emails and protests Ivy never got to see. Each sentence was a thread, stitching her slowly back together. And sometimes Ivy would speak. In fragments, like broken glass, reflecting bits of truth. He had a scar behind his right ear. He smelled like cologne and printer toner. He said no one would miss me until it was too late. Lena wrote it all down. On the 4th day of Ivy's recovery, Lena went through the USB drive again. She'd played every file, scanned every folder. But something had always bothered her. One small file, labeled only untitled 9.wav. She had skipped it before, assuming it was corrupted. This time, she opened it with a different player. It wasn't Ivy's voice. It was male. Calm. Almost bored. She talks too much. But it's okay. Nobody listens to girls like her. I'll make sure she stays quiet this time. The audio was short. Only 16 seconds. But Lena froze when she heard it. She knew that voice. Chase Dillard, psychology TA. Brilliant, charming, full of sharp wit and hollow charm. He tutored Ivy once, briefly. Lena remembered how Ivy used to avoid him at campus events. She also remembered a poem in Ivy's book, "Charm is the first mask they wear." Lena pulled up campus records. Chase had worked under Professor Keene, the one whose office sat directly above the old Eastbridge sub-basement, and Chase had access to it. That night, Lena took the voice memo to Richie. His hands trembled as he hit play. "It's him," Lena said. He was working with Mallory. Or playing his own game, Richie murmured. He's the kind of man who hides in the middle of the crowd. The next morning, Lena brought headphones to Ivy's bedside. She didn't say anything, just placed them gently over her ears and pressed play. Ivy closed her eyes, and when the voice spoke, her whole body flinched. A moment passed. Then she opened her eyes again, voice hoarse, barely audible. That's him. Chase? Lena asked. Ivy nodded. Then she whispered, but he wasn't alone. Richie filed the audio with the state police. Unlike campus security, they took it seriously. An official investigation began. But Chase was gone. He hadn't shown up to his classes in 2 days. His apartment was empty. Car missing. The police issued a warrant, but it was clear he'd run, or someone had helped him disappear. Ivy stayed silent most of the day. Then, at 2:30 a.m., she jolted awake, gasping. Lena rushed to her side. What is it? I remember. He said something. Ivy's lips were dry, cracked. Her eyes wild. What did he say? Before I blacked out, he whispered, "No one reads the archives anymore." Lena frowned. The archives? Ivy says, the basement, campus library. There's something there. That morning, Lena went to the library. She told the head librarian she was researching a paper on administrative abuse and requested access to the restricted faculty archives. The woman raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. She handed Lena a key. The archives were cold, dusty. Rows of filing cabinets, gray and forgotten. Folders dating back decades. Faded photos. Locked drawers. Lena didn't know what she was looking for until she found a sealed file labeled Read A. Withhold from records. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside were written complaints dated 2015-2016. Detailed accusations. Time-stamped photos. Emails between Amelia Reed and Dean Mallory. None of it had been made public. And behind that file, another one, labeled Lane I, Confidential. It wasn't Ivy's diary. It was a record of her private sessions with the campus counselor. But someone had annotated it with red pen marks. Dismissive comments like student exaggerating, unverified, and worse, emotional instability suspected. At the bottom, accessed by C. Dillard, approved by D. Mallory. Lena's mouth went dry. He'd been watching her long before she knew. Ivy hadn't just stumbled onto danger. She had been targeted. Because she asked questions. Because she trusted the wrong people. Because she kept a record, and the people in power were terrified of proof. Lena returned to the hospital, folders clutched to her chest. She sat beside Ivy's bed, opened the files, and read them aloud. By the time she finished, Ivy was crying. Not out of fear, but out of anger. They wrote me off before they ever read a word. Lena reached for her hand. But now they're reading everything. After the email blast, after the protests, after the investigation, something changed at Maple Hill. More girls came forward. Names once feared began to circulate in quiet conversations. Documents and anonymous letters slipped under doors. What began as Ivy's story became a firestorm. And in the middle of it, Lena stood firm, guarding Ivy's words like sacred scripture, spreading the story like gospel. The administration tried to downplay it. But the media had already moved in. Ivy's case was on the news. A podcast picked it up. Students began quoting her diary as protest slogans. Weeks later, Ivy walked back into her dorm room. She stopped just inside the door, breathing in the still air, fingers brushing the edge of her desk like touching the ghost of her old self. She sat, opened a new journal, and wrote, "I survived, but the girl who walked into room 302 is gone." She believed that writing would save her. She was right. Now I write to save others. It had been 47 days since Ivy Lane was found alive. In that time, the story had evolved from a campus scandal to a national reckoning. Ivy's face had become a symbol. Her quiet strength, her relentless writing, her whispered warnings, all etched into headlines and interviews. But Ivy herself, she remained mostly silent, not by force, by choice. She let her diary speak for her. And now, it was about to speak louder than ever. The state had opened an independent investigation. 3 university board members were placed. The Office of the Attorney General subpoenaed documents and testimonies related to the cover-up. The hearing was scheduled for Friday. Ivy was invited to testify. The courtroom was small, but every seat was filled. Dozens waited outside. Lena sat beside Ivy at the long wooden table, and across from them sat Dean Mallory, hands folded. He looked older, smaller, less certain, but Ivy didn't look at him, not once. When called, Ivy stood slowly, steadied herself on shaking legs, and walked to the witness stand. A quiet filled the room so deep you could hear a page turn. Her voice was calm, clear. "My name is Ivy Lane. I'm a student at Maple Hill College. I kept a diary. At first, it was just for myself, but then I started writing down what I couldn't say out loud. Things that made me afraid. Things that made me feel unsafe. I reported what I could. I told a few people. And then I was told I was confused, overreacting, misunderstanding. But I wasn't. They knew. The people in charge knew. Dean Mallory knew. Chase Dillard knew. And others, men whose names I still remember, who touched places they shouldn't have, who watched too closely, who asked questions that weren't academic. And when I didn't play along, I became a problem, a file to dismiss, a voice to erase." She read aloud. "If they silence me, know this, I saw what they did. I remember their faces. I remember their breath behind my neck. If you forget me, you forget every girl like me. But if you remember me, then maybe the next girl will never need a diary to beg for her life." Ivy stepped down. Her seat creaked as she sat back beside Lena. Dean Mallory's lawyer requested a recess. By the end of the hearing, new charges had been filed. The cover-up, once labeled administrative failure, was now being tried as criminal negligence and conspiracy. Chase Dillard remained missing, but his photo now sat on the FBI's wanted list, marked with a red border. The rest of the names, those Ivy didn't say aloud, were being investigated one by one. And the college? It was burning under scrutiny. A week later, Lena was asked to write an editorial for a national magazine. She wrote about Ivy, yes, but she also wrote about silence, about how institutions are built to listen to themselves, about the cost of telling the truth when everyone's invested in the lie. Ivy didn't survive because someone saved her. She survived because she left breadcrumbs in the dark. She survived because she wrote. We found her because she refused to vanish quietly. And the article went viral. Back in her dorm, Ivy finally sat in front of her mirror. It had been taped with warnings, covered in doubt, stained with fear. Now, she wrote one final note. This time, for herself. You were right. They didn't believe you. But you never needed them to. You believed yourself, and that saved your life. One last file from the USB. Hidden, unnamed, untagged. Lena found it months later. Ivy's voice. Calmer now. Older. Wiser. If you're hearing this, it means my story didn't end in that room. It means someone found the words I left behind. I hope you're reading your own story now. I hope you know your voice is sharp, not soft. And if they ever tell you it's all in your head, tell them you have the evidence in your hands. And if you don't, write it. Write until they can't erase you. The summer sun filtered gently through Ivy's dorm window, turning dust into golden ghosts. Outside, laughter from orientation week echoed faintly. New students exploring the place she almost died in. Inside, Ivy sat cross-legged on the floor with a fresh notebook in her lap. Not black this time. It was soft blue, with pressed flowers embedded in the cover, given to her by Lena on the first day of spring. On the first page, Ivy had written only one thing. Not every girl gets to come back, but every girl deserves to be heard. She hadn't filled the rest. Not yet. Dean Mallory received 5 years for obstruction, tampering, and professional misconduct. The sentence wasn't long, not nearly long enough, but it was something. And more importantly, it cracked the wall. Universities across the state began reopening old cases. Anonymous hotlines were established. Policies were rewritten. Survivors came out of the shadows, together. And Maple Hill? They named a new resource center after Ivy Lane. She refused. Name it after someone who didn't survive, she said. They're the ones who never got their story back. Ivy became an author. Her first book, The Girl Who Wasn't Believed, topped bestseller lists within days. She didn't do interviews. She didn't go on tours. But her readers? They sent thousands of letters, emails, whispers passed from one survivor to another. She told my story. She gave me the words I couldn't say. Because of her, I wrote my own truth. On the anniversary of her disappearance, Lena and Ivy visited room 302 for the last time. The building was being torn down. They stood in front of the locked door. Ivy placed her hand on it, smiled faintly, and whispered, "You didn't win." Then she turned away and never looked back. If you're interested in stories of disappearances that defy reason, mysteries that haunt, crimes that unravel slowly, and voices that deserve to be heard, subscribe for more.